Greetings and salutations, everyone. I do hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. With that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. Brisbane, Water National Park, New South Wales, Australia, 2015. It was 2015 around May or June. Every 2 months or so, we'd do a trip to Kilcare in the Central Coast to visit my in-laws. Therefore, the route is very well known to us. Normally, I'm the family driver, but this time I felt tired. It was already after 8 p.m. before leaving home, so I asked my wife to do the driving. After exiting the freeway, we normally take Woy Woy Road. We had just left behind the Rural Fire Service headquarters on the outskirts of Caroyne. It wouldn't have been even a minute when all of a sudden a group of kangaroos jumped in front of us, approaching from the left and running forward, crossing the road. There was no moon or oncoming traffic, so the only lights were ours. As this was a sudden thing, my wife had to brake a bit hard. We almost hit a couple of them, but luckily nothing happened. My guess, we dropped our speed to 50 or 60 kilometers an hour. One didn't make the jump. It just ran on the left and a bit to the front for about a half a second, and then veered hard, disappearing into the darkness. Then I noticed in my peripheral vision another one running right next to me. As I turned my head to see it properly, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. Time seemed to slow down, and it was like my brain was trying to figure out, meaning by a process of comparison to known objects in my memory. My inner talk was like, is this a roo? It is not, because roos do not run moving their arms like a sprint athlete. It has to be a roo, not because they do not have a humanoid round skull. Is it a person then? If it is one, it's a very hairy one. But not, because humans do not have muzzles, like a dog or a fox. It has to be a roo. No, look at its ears. Right on the side of its head, and not on the top. And they were small, but pointy. This had a nose and a snout of a dog. That was the sort of mental inner check I was having, while this thing was running 1.5 meters or 2 next to my door, or perhaps a little behind the back door and mine. And then I thought about its size. It was too big, 2 meters tall, plus easily, very muscular and lean. Effectively like a sprint athlete, because everything was so dark and it was on the side and not in front. I couldn't tell what color it was. Its tone was very close to the environment, like the bush, not darker or lighter, which made recognition more difficult. I naturally focused on the face. I didn't pay attention to its legs or hands. They were moving too fast. Although they were in my visual peripheral and awareness, The hands seemed to have long fingers ending in pointed straight claws and hair. The body hair wasn't long or thick. Therefore, I was able to see how it came out from the skin around the contour of its head. I couldn't see its eye color because of an angle, just they seemed to be well set inside the orbits. Then I started to feel a horrible dread. This thing perhaps was chasing its dinner, and we stuffed its chase up, so he must have been mad at us. I thought I have my wife next to me who hasn't noticed anything, and my 2 little boys sleeping in the back. This creature possibly could push us off the road. It looked that strong, particularly because my wife also wouldn't be expecting it. Then, as I thought it was about to turn its head to look at me, which was a horrific thought, then it steered off hard to the left and disappeared into the darkness of the bush. As it did that, I could see the details of a well-developed trap muscle and the roundness of its head with these pointed ears in the same position of a normal human's. Then it was just bush passing by at speed and all dark. That was the last image, and it disappeared like it never happened. This whole ordeal must have been just about 6 or 7 seconds at most. I turned my head to see my wife, and she said nothing. In 2017, I was sharing a studio with 2 artists with Aboriginal heritage, and I decided to tell my strange story after they opened up about a few things that happened to them. Although none was really versed in the more secret aspects of their culture, they told me it was probably an ancient being from the dream time called the Nunuku, a shepherd of the bush who possibly visits the elders for a secret ceremony, although that was more their guess than anything else. One of them asked me to point in a Google map where the encounter happened, and when we checked it out to our surprise, we realized it was right next to an Aboriginal secret art site. Here's a little more detailed bit of it. We turned onto Woy Woy Road, heading towards Woy Wow, and traveled approximately 1 or 2 minutes. On this particular evening, I was feeling a bit tired, so I asked my wife to do the driving, so I guess that gave me a chance to look around and look on the side and so on. Ahead, we had a group of kangaroo on an angle from the left forward, and it was quite sudden. A few roo jumped in front of us, and my wife had to brake a little bit. And there was one of 2 that jumped to the left into the bush. In that moment, when the 2 veered to the left, I felt there was another one running right next to me. So I naturally looked to the side, a little over my shoulder to the left, and noticed this very large kangaroo. It was very strange because my brain was trying to make sense of it. And it felt like time had slowed down, and I was looking at its arm of a sprinter rather than a kangaroo. I would say that I naturally concentrated on its head, and what I could see was this humanoid figure, pretty much what looked like a 100 or 200 meter runner with its arms swinging back and forth. Probably because of the angle in my attention on its face, I could barely sense its legs moving. My brain was in conflict, asking questions of, what the heck is this thing? Roos don't move their arms this way. Is it a human? No, it's too hairy. It had a round head and this muscle and a canine-looking mouth. It looked quite gentle, actually. Not like a long, aggressive mass of nasty creature like a hyena or something like that. The snout was quite gentle and soft in a way that it went from its forehead into its nose. It wasn't too long, and it was fairly short. So talking, he means gentle, so kind of like the slope. I also remember looking at its ears, and they were set in the same way of a human's. They were quite pointed, though. I couldn't tell you the color, but essentially the hair had a tone of the level of darkness or lightness of the bush. I was in a brain struggle, and I felt that it was going to look at me, and I was really feeling this dread and intense fear because I knew it definitely was not a kangaroo. It was some type of weird creature, and perhaps it was angry because we messed up its dinner, the ruse. My wife, who was looking forward and driving the car, was not aware of it, and I thought if this thing turns around and pushes the car, we might end up going off the road, but luckily, the creature didn't look at me. It just turned abruptly to its left and disappeared into the bush. I remember seeing its trap muscle in the back of its head and the ears, and that was it. Time slowed down. I saw it for 6, maybe 8 seconds at most. I looked back at my wife and decided to say nothing. My kids were sleeping in the back. I was completely baffled. I kept it to myself. I was aware of creatures and things like this, and have had strange things happen in my life. It wasn't extremely weird, but it was weird enough that I didn't tell anyone. A few months later, I did tell my brother who lives in the States, and I sent him a message and we talked about it. Then a couple years later, in 2017, I shared my experience with a few people, and there were 2 women there with Aboriginal heritage. One of them mentioned, she described it as a Nunuku, sort of an ancient being from the dream time, who essentially is the custodian of the bush. And she said the elders in their culture possibly had interactions with the creature, like in secret ceremonies. But she, not being an elder, couldn't corroborate that. We were on Woy Woy Road and had passed the little Kurong suburb, and just before the national park there is a Royal Fire Service. It wasn't even a minute past this headquarters. The road is 80 kilometers per hour. My wife braked so hard so we didn't hit the ruse. My estimate is we were doing between 50 and 60. I would say it was 1.5 meters away from me. It was a little bit behind me because I had to look over my shoulder. It was between my window and the back window. It was keeping pace with our car. The ears were pretty much like a human's, but pointy. They were the size of a human's, but very pointy, but not the shape of a human's. Pretty much like you'd see in a drawing of a gnome or a fairy. It was easily 2 meters tall, 6.5 feet. It was covered in hair all over, and I could see skin through it, kind of like a guy who was going bald. You could see the hairs coming out of its skin. It had the tone of a cool moon, a greeny gray dead kind of color. From my peripheral vision, I could see the top of its thighs, like when a runner lifts its knees on each leg. I could see the front of its thighs. The skull was round like a human. It was very humanoid. And this thing had muscle, short hair that wasn't too dense, a very gentle slope and curve from the glabella, where the forehead joins the nose, on the brow ridge with a slight curve to the nose, a short muzzle, and a fairly strong jaw muscle. I couldn't see any teeth because its jaw was closed. From my angle, the eyes seemed small, and they were set deep into its orbits and very dark. I wouldn't say the eye ridges were like that of a Cro-Magnon, but a fairly pronounced brow ridge. It had pretty much the same length of hair all over. I remember the hands moving. I felt like the fingers were fairly long. In some ways, it reminded me of a picture from Dr. Seuss. The fingers were hairy, and it had long tip with dark tipped like claws. From what I could see, there was no part any hairier than the rest. Everything was covered with hair, even its muzzle, everything. I didn't see any hair hanging off its muscle, so I would say probably the muscles were slightly short-haired. Compared to a normal human, the snout was about 5 centimeters forward. If you think of the tip of the nose and the chin about 5 centimeters forward, I felt it was more dog-shaped. I felt like it finished with a darkish nose. With a human, the nose comes back into the mouth, and then you have the indent at the top of the top lip. This thing didn't have that. It was like a dog. When the nose finishes, it just comes straight down to a chin. The nasal bone had a gentle slope to the tip of its nose. Then imagine it goes completely vertically down to the chin. It was pretty much a doggish looking nose. The rest of the head was humanish with hair and pointed ears. The nose was pretty much like a dog's with dark hair than the body. As you can see in my drawing, which will be at the end of this, the tip of the nose comes down in a straight line to the chin. That's why I had the feeling of a dog or fox on 2 legs. I felt like it was a very lean and strong 100-meter runner, but a hairy one and big. When I felt it was just about to look at me, it made a hard left and disappeared. I felt it was a male because of its body, but I couldn't see any genitalia or anything like that. It had very well developed traps, perhaps a little towards a gorilla. It would be hard to find a human with traps that high, pretty much like a bodybuilder because the muscles were quite sculptured. I still haven't told my wife. Her world view is different than mine. I know she wouldn't believe me or take it seriously. I will tell the kids, though, when they are older. But I think I'll keep my wife out of it. I'm aware of Dogman, but they seem to be a bit more canine in America, apparently. The reason I wanted to share this was because I needed someone else's perspective. Even though I have a background in science, all my life I've experienced weird stuff. Even though this is daunting and weird, I'm not that unfamiliar with stuff like this. Maybe not exactly like this, but in a way it was too bad. If it had looked at me or given a bump to the car, probably the experience, how I felt, would be very different. It definitely changed my life, but I wouldn't say I was traumatized, not at all. I'm more curious, a little scared, but more cautious. It's changed my view of the Australian bush. Now, I think I would stay very close to the bush. It's changed my view of what might be around, for sure. Here is this gentleman's drawing of the creature he saw on that evening. So, what's your call on that? To me, that is a werewolf. There's no tail. The ears, the human-like features, or it may be something else that maybe just is native to Australia. Who knows? Because, I mean, really, they have species of animals that are just so foreign to anything the New World or Europe has, that it wouldn't surprise me that they have their own kind of, and I hate using the word variant of a dogman or werewolf. That's horrifying, though. I could never imagine riding shoddy, looking off to the side, and seeing that thing running aside of us with my kids in the back. It's definitely a horrific experience, if I do say so myself. Let's jump into today's second encounter. Logan Village, Queensland, Australia, 2017. I was driving home from my partner's home on the Gold Coast. I had just turned onto Stegman Road. The second I turned the corner, I saw a creature. They were doing road work at the time, so I was going slowly. Firstly, I saw what I thought may have been a dog, but when I drew level with it, I saw that it was at least 7 feet tall and crouched. It was shaped like a human. I got about 20 to 30 meters past it, and I needed to have another look, so I turned around. When I got back to the spot, the creature was still there. It was foraging through this ditch. There must have been roadkill or something. It was squatted down, foraging like a human would. I stopped my car, opened the door, and said, "WTF?" Put my foot out the door. The creature stood up, looked at me, turned around, and legged it straight for the bush. The eyes were a bright green. It had this grayish-black fur. It could never have been anything else other than a yowie. It was crouched down like a human. That's why it looked like a dog initially. But when I stopped and got out of the car, it stood up, and it was a good 1.5 feet taller than I. It looked at me with these piercing green eyes, then turned and legged it. The way it took off, it would have beaten Usain Bolt. I was only 20 feet away from it. How I could describe it, it looked like an Olympic sprinter getting off the blocks. When it took off, it clipped the street sign with its head. That's how tall this creature was. The arms and legs were thick. The arms and legs were very muscular and thick. The head is what really surprised me because it had an elongated snout, much like a dog. But its head was the same shape as a human. Basically, it had a slightly elongated snout down to where its mouth was, but it had a human-shaped head. The bottom part of its face protruded a bit, sort of like a primate type would look, or a dogman. It had a completely hairy face, but with really piercing green eyes. That's what caught my initial attention. The hair on its face was exactly the same as what was on its body, fairly coarse looking. It was grayish, kind of black in my headlights, black going gray, salt and pepper. The hair wasn't that long. It was more shaggy and matted. There was a feral stench. I don't know whether there was a dead animal in the ditch at the time, but that's what it smelt like. A dead, decomposing flesh. I went back the next day with my dad, and we found a large print in that ditch that we could not identify. In terms of a human print, this would have been the size 15 or 16. When I pulled up, it was crouched down like a human, but I could tell that it was so much bigger. And when it stood up, its head touched that street sign. I've worked construction, and those signs are set high purposely so you do not hit your head on them. This thing was easily over 7 feet tall. My thing is, why would this guy get out of his vehicle? He passes it, sees this creature, realizes, hey, this thing's big, drives by it, turns around and goes to have a look. That's just insanity, if you ask me. I'm glad that nothing bad happened to him, but, it's just crazy to me that he did that. Today's third encounter comes to us from Warrangary, Queensland, 1985. We were 15 years old at the time. Myself and my female friend were returning home from a night out in the surfer's paradise. When we were close to home, we realized we were short on cab fare, so we asked him to stop short on the corner of San Fernando and Hinkler Drive, which was the beginning of our estate, a new estate at the time. We parted ways at the corner, and I was about a third of the way home to my house, and at about 20 to 30 meters away, there was a creature that was very tall with long ears and glowing eyes. I can't remember if the eyes were green or red, but they were glowing. It was slim, tall. The ears were sticking straight up. And I did an about face and ran. I caught up with my friend, and I remember shaking her and describing it. She didn't want to know about it. I ended up going home the long way. After that night, I would never walk home that way again. Back then, there was a lot more bush than there is now. It was face on to me, so I couldn't see if it had a snout. Its ears were long and straight up in the same position on its head where a dog's ears would be, but about 20 to 30 centimeters long in the shape of a Doberman. I estimate its height to be 7 to 8 feet tall. It was tall. The eyes stood out because they seemed self-illuminating. I've always described it as a Yowie encounter, but after looking at pictures on the internet, no, it looked nothing like it. More like a Dogman. There was another time in the same area with the same friend. When we were in the bush smoking, that's where we hid from our parents to smoke, all of a sudden there was this whoosh sound feeling, and it was like a force. My friend started hitting the ground with a stick, and we were both saying, "What is it? What is it?" I don't know if that was anything to do with it, but it was very confusing. And tonight's final encounter comes to us from Greenbushes, Western Australia, 2008. We had been at the Boyup Brook Rodeo, and we were heading back to the Greenbushes on Greenbush Boyup Brook Road at around 1:30 in the morning. We had been pulled up by the police for a license check. Shortly after, we were driving at around 80 kilometers per hour when a creature came from the bush on the left side of the road. It seemed to be injured, as its back legs were lifeless. It seemed to be pulling itself along at the speed with its arms. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. There was this massive creature. It was very hairy and had red eyes. It was dragging its legs up to its chest. It was a very strange gait. I said to my husband, "WTF?" It was coming straight for the car, and the next thing we knew, there was a big bang. It went right over the roof of the car and onto the other side. Then it looked upright. It was going along with its hands first, then dragging up to its feet. It looked like it had been injured or shot. It stood up at about 8 feet tall. It came out and over our car and then stood upright, and it was massive. It was in a human form, but really huge across its chest. It had long, shaggy fur. It was sort of an ape-like creature, the face resemblant that of a human in an ape. The eyes were round and quite large and red. I don't know if the glow from the eyes were from the headlights, but it seemed self-illuminating. It had large canine-like teeth on its upper jaw. It had a huge head with long hair, but the hair on its face wasn't long. The skin on its face was a dark brown or black. The rest of its body was long and shaggy, and at least 3 inches long, had very long arms with a muscular and long legs. It also looked very upset, and it looked also like it was in a lot of pain. It looked like it was running from something, wounded, injured, maybe a car had hit it. When it was on all fours, it took up half the road. It came out of the bush at a speed. There was a loud bang when it went over our roof. I thought the roof was going to cave in. When it landed, it ran and turned around to look at us and kept running. It went over the embankment on the other side. At one stage, I thought we were looking at a werewolf. You had to be there. Later, I was telling a girlfriend of mine, and she had seen the exact same thing down at Donnybrook at the Brookhampton Road turnoff in 2007. She said it was covered in fur and at least 9 feet tall. She was in her car at the time and described the exact same thing. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed today's bonus upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.